We ready for our welcome?
Yes.
Okay.
Cynthia.
Okay, thank you very much, Mona. I'm Cynthia Rubenstein. I'm the first vice president for WDC, and I'm here filling in for Tazeen Ahmed tonight because she is on grandbaby watch. She is just about to become a first-time grandmother. So without further ado, welcome to the WDC webinar for this evening. Next slide, please. A few words about WDC. We have been around for over 60 years. In fact, in 1957, WDC launched with a luncheon and Eleanor Roosevelt as its very first speaker. We sponsor a speaker series. We do community education panels. We do candidate forums. We have one coming up on April 28th that will feature the District 6 Democratic candidates for Congress. And we also have very active committees. We are always looking for talented women to join. We amplify WDC's voice in Annapolis and in the county on legislation. Next slide, please. Here are the committees that WDC has to offer people who are interested. If we have anybody on who is not a member, we also encourage you to join. We have a very active advocacy committee, which is busy right now during the middle of the General Assembly session. And we have been advocating on behalf of 40 different bills. And we are looking forward to crossover day to see how many of them look like they will make it through. Next slide, please. Our executive committee includes our officers as well as our immediate past president, Diana Conway. And we have had a series of very distinguished speakers in the last year or two, including journalists, authors, political historians, elected officials. They run the gamut, and we look forward to having a couple more of them I'll talk about in a few minutes in events that are coming up in March through May. And here is that slide. We are coming up to an event on April 11th at 7. This will be on Zoom. We're going to be featuring Barbara McQuaid, who has just written a new book and is out on book tour. She is on, many of you will recognize her from NBC News as well as MSNBC. And if you pay attention to podcasts, she is a terrific co-host on the podcast called Sisters-in-Law. I highly recommend it. I mentioned a little bit earlier the District 6 Democratic Candidates Forum, and that will be happening up county. We are determining the last few details for that. And then, of course, on Monday, May 13th, we're going to be doing a Tommy Raskin speaker event, and people will be joining that event on Zoom as well. And, of course, more to come. One reminder for our attendees, please submit your questions via the chat. And here is a handy diagram to show you exactly how that's done. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mona, who's going to pick up and lead the rest of the webinar. Mona's speaker. I'm going to give her a minute to get her audio to work.
Apologies, everyone. Thank you so much for that, Cynthia. Yes, and just more specifically with the Q&A, if you can ensure that the to field says it's being sent to Q&A, and we'll be collecting all of those questions and answering them hopefully at the end. So first off, just want to thank everyone for joining us on this lovely evening for a very esteemed panel. As was mentioned today, the topic is building political power we will be focusing on the many rich opportunities and programs we have here locally that are really helping to create that pipeline for leadership. And when we talk about leadership throughout the panel today, we'll be talking about a multitude, a whole spectrum of political, community leadership, as well as civil service. So without further ado, we're very lucky to have the panelists we have today, and I'm just gonna let each one of them introduce themselves before jumping in. I'm sorry. Joyce, would you like to go first?
Everyone, my name is Joyce King. I'm Chief Counsel at the Frederick County State's Attorney's Office. I've been a prosecutor for 11 years in child exploitation. I serve on the Maryland State's Attorneys Association and National District Attorneys Association Board for their legislative committee, and have been doing policy work in conjunction with my prosecution. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thanks so much, Joyce. Diane?
Hi, good evening. Diane Fink. I am the Executive Director of Emerge Maryland. I've been the director since the founding in 2012. Prior to that, I worked on many campaigns, and I was part of the original founding board for the Western Maryland Democratic Caucus. I served as chair for Friends for Neighborhood Progress. I served for 7 years on the Frederick Community Action Agency. I also serve now on the board of directors for Girls on the Run in Mid and Western Maryland chapter. I served for 8 years on the Frederick Democratic Central Committee, and I am thrilled for Tazeen. I just found out I'm going to be a grandmother in September, so I am excited for her, and I'm going to be thinking about her tonight.
Wonderful. And then Yvette?
I am Yvette Lewis. I am the former chair of the Maryland Democratic Party. I think I'm the longest serving chair in the history of the Maryland Democratic Party, so I'm told. I am currently an at-large member for the Democratic National Committee. I serve on the Rules and Bylaws Committee for the DNC. I'm also Chair Emerita of the State Chairs Association, serving as the leader chair of their voter protection standing committee. We have rebranded it as the Voter Education and Engagement Program so that it feels more inclusive of the things that we're trying to accomplish as far as getting people civically engaged.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, everyone, for giving those introductions. And hopefully folks were reading what is being shared on the screen share as well, because these amazing women have just, skimmed the very surface of their accomplishments. And what we really want to talk about today is how they got to where they are. And Yvette, if you don't mind, I'd love to start with you, just because I love the fact that you've had such an amazing journey through musical arts to being an educator for decades. And then, as you noted, being the longest standing chair for the Maryland DNC. And I just wanted to ask, so what first pushed you or inspired you towards your leadership journey?
It was really having conversations with people and them wanting to share their ideas with me. And I didn't understand why I was worthy of having those ideas shared with me, or suggestions or offers to help. And it became clear that people valued information that I was sharing with them. And I think that that's because I have walked in so many worlds. I think it's because I have had a career on stage. I think it's because I was an educator and then I came to politics. But in each one of those iterations, as I like to call them, I was always out front, not by choice necessarily. It's just that that's where I found myself. But I also found that in leading people, I also wanted to help, not just lead, I wanted to help. And everything that I've done has been about helping others, bringing others, whether it was mentoring young singers as they were trying to get into the world of opera, whether it was teaching teachers, doing workshops for teachers, which I did in 7 states around the country, and then eventually leading the Maryland Democratic Party. At the core of everything that I've done, it's always been to try to help other people.
I love that. And it's funny because it resonates a lot with me, because I feel like when you do shift from industry to industry, you start to see the analogies across them, not the differences, and you feel more comfortable going into new areas.
Well, it's interesting because it wasn't so much that I shifted. I was sort of drawn into these different iterations, right? Because when I was serving as senior advisor for Chris Van Hollen, I had left the state party and I was working for Senator Van Hollen, and I was asked to come back to the state party, and that's sort of been my life. You know, when people ask, I answer the call, because if they think that I can be of service, then that's what I always want to do.
Wonderful. Well, and Diane, in many ways, being at the helm of an organization like Emerge Maryland, you often, I believe, usher and see those leadership glimmers in people who come through Emerge. In fact, Joyce, you didn't mention, but you yourself are an Emerge graduate. I'd love to get your perspective, Diane, and then Joyce, on that time and moment when, like, you see someone sort of realize they're ready for leadership and go in and move them forward.
Yeah, that's it never gets boring. It's always exciting. And what I really like the most about it is that I can see these qualities in these women before they do. And, you know, helping them to bring them out, helping them to nurture those qualities, helping them to grow into who I can see who they really are and who they can be. This is something that it's been such a deep pleasure of mine, not to have the focus on me, but to put the spotlight on these women who have a desire to move forward in leadership and to be part of the decision making in Maryland that makes our state so great. It's really exciting especially when I run into these women, not just young women. I mean, to be honest with you, they range in age from 22 to 75 that I've had through the classes. So, you know, there are women who are of a certain age, young or old, who they think either their time has passed or they're just not ready. And what's really fun is to show them that neither is true. Their time is now, no matter who they are or what age they are.
And just for, I guess, awareness for those joining the webinar, the Emerge program, what is the framework of that program a little bit? You know, you mentioned age is not a criteria. So what are some things that make people think of it?
So basically what our mission and our goal is to get Democratic women elected to local office. And now we have women running for federal office. So we do a candidate training that lasts several months, 75 hours worth of training. It's an in-depth deep dive into each subject matter, into how to run a campaign, how to run a winning campaign, with many other factors. There's a lot of other things that we offer as well in these trainings that go beyond just the campaign, but it's helping. There's a culture that we help to nurture that really emphasizes lifting as you climb and representation of women from all walks of life across the state. So, you know, we build a network of women and have built a network of women all over Maryland who understand that it's not just about them. It's about the sisterhood. It's about women in general, and it's about women who have been traditionally marginalized in the past, and how do we lift those women as well.
And Joyce, as a graduate of Emerge, and I think, am I correct in saying as the most recently, someone who's most recently gone through an election, probably on this webinar, could you share a little bit about your experience and everything that you've taken from it and other things that have really helped you to get to where you are?
Yes. Well, first, I'm not quite graduated. I think we still have 3 classes left. So I'm in the part of the current Emerge class,
Okay.
but I anticipate graduating. It has been an unbelievably enriching experience. And I do want to say I feel so honored to be a part of this panel, to have this important discussion, because for someone like me, who I have dedicated my life to public service, I really loved what Yvette said about answering the call. And for me, making the pivot from being a public servant, supporting people who are elected, to finding the courage and the voice and the space, like Diane said, to want to run for myself, to feel capable enough that I can do this myself, is a big leap for any woman. And especially for me, culturally, overcoming kind of old ideas that I've been indoctrinated with, that I should be submissive to a man, that I should be a good supporter, and that it's not for me to take the lead role. These were things that I personally had to overcome. But very much like what Diane said, I think it's a testament to the women who have gone through that program, but for my own county executive, Jessica Fitzwater, who is a graduate of Emerge, I wouldn't have applied. It took a woman who was elected, who's been through the process, to give me to look me in the eyes and say, you would be a great candidate, that this county and this office needs you. So with that type of motivation and support and that community, I think we go way further than I would have gone with my own will. So I've learned a lot, and I had a lot, and I've met with Diane before applying because of my own fears about wanting to run for office, and feeling like I do policy work, I do governance, I do these things already. But I think what it's about is that women should be in places where decisions are being made, as RBG says, right? And instead of being a supporting role, the woman can be that lead role and can be the decision maker and should be the decision maker. And that's what I've found in playing in the second fiddle or the backstage of things, is that more women need to be in that front role.
And I'm sure it was, looking to examples like Yvette. I mean, they're few and far between, but I'd love to know, Yvette, like when you were starting your career in the political realm, who did you look towards, or were you really feeling like you had to pave your own way in the absence of seeing, examples around you of other women?
It was interesting. It was a combination of both. I had to pave my own way, but there were gentle, wonderful sisters who propped me up and made me believe that I can do it. One is on this call, Karen Brito. I remember Karen was one of the first people to reach out to me. She and Vivian Malloy. She may not even remember this, but they took me out to dinner and sort of held my hand, because basically, as I entered this world as state party chair, as we all find ourselves many times, we're thrown into the deep end of the ocean and we're told to swim. Women aren't really given, we're not given a learner's manual. We just sort of have to figure it out. But isn't that always the way with us? We do figure it out, right? Everybody else, gets their hand held. And I won't say who that everybody else is, but I think you know who I mean. Women, we don't get our hands held. We just jump in and we figure it out. And I think about Diane Fink, how did she just, all of this happen? She just had a passion and she figured it out. That was me. I had a passion, and I had a passion for politics. And it really came about, and I've told this story before, after the Bush-Gore election. And it was one of those things where I was so frustrated, but I realized that the only thing I had done was vote. I hadn't really done anything proactive to be involved. And I felt that I really had no one to blame but myself. And I made a promise to myself that I would never feel like that again after an election where I had not done everything that I could do. And that's what sort of got my political juices going. And then, as I said, I had, people along the way who lifted me up and, sort of let me ride on their coattails. And sort of showed me, not to dwell on Karen Brito, but she is so wonderful. I remember in 2007 when we all got involved in the Obama campaign, for example. And Karen helped us, get everything all set up. We didn't know what we were doing, and it turned out to be one of the most successful Obama operations in the country, what we did here in Maryland. So it's people like that who know nothing about you, but just say, you know what, I want to help. And that instilled in me wanting to help someone else.
And I also think you touched upon something that, one, as women, I think we do a great job of multitasking. And two, because we don't have this clear carpet rolled out in front of us, we find more innovation. And, you spoke to it with the Obama campaign. It sounds like the team had to be more out of the box in its thinking, and that's where certain great moments then come about.
Well, everything that I've done has really sort of been out of the box. It doesn't, there is no roadmap for anything that I've done that's led me to any position. It's been out of the box. And, I'll talk a little bit about that later when I talk about some of the things that we had to do, for example, during COVID. Everything was out of the box, finding new ways to do things. But that's part of, a leadership skill that you develop as you pull on other things that you've done in the past that sort of inform decisions that you make about, okay, how can I do this and apply that to this to be successful?
What's worse, children or other politicians?
One and the same, sweetheart.
Yes. Okay. Well, and Diane, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've never, have you run for office in the past?
Just Central Committee.
Okay.
When I was looking to run for state delegate here in Frederick County, unfortunately, I still live in a district that is deep red.
Mm.
And the redistricting put me into a district that I had a chance of winning. And when I decided the following, after the next cycle that I was going to run, it was actually right before the redistricting, they redistricted me out of the purple district into the red district. So anyway, long story, I did not run because I knew that I wouldn't win, and I did not want to spend any effort and take up other people's time and money by running a race that I knew wasn't gonna work. So of course, now I encourage women to run in these districts. So, and we have flipped some seats though. Our alums have flipped some seats. And so that's been very rewarding.
Well, and I think what you just shared is one, that, naivety we sometimes have when we feel like we're facing this uphill battle, but also like the strategizing that many people do that either talks them in or out of running. Could you talk a little bit more about, what are some of the things that you often tell people who are thinking about running, what to factor in to make that decision?
Yeah, we do a whole day's workshop in the summer on, and that is included in there. But we talk about, what is it that you want to accomplish? Is your family going to be on board? Is your employer going to be on board? Can you afford to take a cut in pay? Because trust me, running for office in Maryland, you are not going to get rich unless you're corrupt. So it's, you have to be willing to work for, very little pay in many of the areas that you'd be running for office. There's also the question of, is what you want to accomplish going to be accomplished at the level of office you're looking to run for? Is that is that the right place for you? If it's not, you might want to step back and think about it. We also talk about, for women who aren't sure about running but want to still be involved in policy making, looking at boards and commissions in the state or in their county. You know, there's so many other opportunities that you can work your way up to running for office. Is the seat available? Like, we don't want people challenging really good Democrats that are already sitting in those seats. It's not necessary. It's not just for to get elected. It's, you know, is there an opportunity? Is the seat available? And is this something that you can get something accomplished? You know, is this where you want to accomplish your goals? And are you going to be plugged into your constituency? This is something we really focus on. It's not about the candidate. It's about the constituents. It's about the voters, and it's about what they need and being a public servant.
And I sort of turn to you, Joyce, and, you know, you've probably been thinking through so many of these things. And one of the questions I have is, what are ways that you've gotten your feet wet, you know, prior to joining Emerge and getting a network of support? What are things that you've done that predated the role that you're in right now that sort of fueled you to keep on going in this direction?
think, I guess to turn the clock back, you know, to the beginning, is that I went to GW and, you know, was intending on working on the Hill and being involved in politics and policy, perhaps being a lobbyist. I got, you know, kind of disillusioned during my, you know, kind of over submersion, I guess you could call it, at undergrad. But I did the We Lead program at American University that helps, you know, young women for candidacy. And, you know, I ended up pivoting and going into the law and going into the prosecutor's office because I wanted to have an impact in the community. I wanted to have a relationship with, like you said, constituents, but really victims of crimes. And, you know, it was absent the, what I used to perceive as the drama and the, you know, mudslinging, and it felt pure. And in working in the community and being very on the front lines with all the stakeholders in governance, the county executive's office, the sheriff's office, the police chief, and, you know, all the community organizations that come in play, I realized that, you know, there are important decisions that need to be made, you know, and I found myself outside of the courtroom making those decisions, being a part of that decision-making process, developing policies that affect public safety, both not just in Frederick County, but in Maryland statewide. And for me, my career kind of went full circle because, as I mentioned, I got the opportunity to serve on the board for the MSAA legislative committee, as well as the National District Attorneys Association. So I got to play part-time lobbyist and, you know, work on legislation that had to do with the criminal justice system in Annapolis and on the Hill, and working very closely with the delegates and senators every session. I realized that I did have the capacity for this, you know, that I was intimately involved, that I was able to, you know, make meaningful changes from the position that I was, and that, you know, if elected, I would have a stronger voice in that space. So that's kind of how I've gotten my feet wet, kind of been around the yard, you know, and got exposure to what this would look like on both ends.
Well, and it's very interesting because it sounds like in some ways you were avoiding certain paths outside of school, but then you circled back to them. But when you did that, it sounds like you had just greater confidence in order to like have the experience that was more resonating.
That's exactly right. Call it fate.
Yeah. And Yvette, I feel like, you know, one of the things that I've heard from all three wonderful women on our panel is that, you know, this ability to relate with constituents and to relate with people in a way that you feel like you can be impactful. You know, when I think about all the people I know who have been more hesitant to go into politics, it may have been because they're not seeking to be public figures And I'm curious, across the three of you, would any of you say that you're actually more of a private or introverted person, and it was hard, and you had different tactics that you could hopefully share about how you overcame that?
No, I'm
No.
not. Sorry, I'm not. But it's because I've been on stage. I
Yes.
mean,
Yes.
so that it's just part of my world. The first time I ever sang on television was with my school choir. I was 8 years old and I sang a solo. I didn't care. I was positively fearless because that was just my personality, and I enjoyed doing that. One of the things though that's a danger in having that kind of personality is knowing when to be introverted. It's
Mm.
knowing when to pull back, right? And that's a constant struggle for someone who's not an introvert, knowing when you walk in the room, when it's best to observe, when it's best to watch, listen, and learn the landscape before you step out there too soon. So it's a constant balancing act. So there's some pros and cons to both. If you think about it that way. So for me, that's always the push and pull for me. When do I pull back and when do I really step out and exude confidence and take control of a situation? So
It's really interesting you say that, Yvette, because in the model of Myers-Briggs, introverts, extroverts, they always think about how do you fuel and refill your cup with energy. And even I love that you mentioned what you did, because even extroverts, which I am as well, I think in different circumstances you could still wear yourself out, and extroverts are less likely to know when to pull back.
mhm.
So, and Diane, I saw you nodding your head when I mentioned the inverse. I'm curious your thoughts and experience there.
There was a time before I started Emerge Maryland that if I had to get up and speak in front of more than 5 people, I would start crying. So it was bad. It was really bad. And I had to learn very quickly that I had to get over that. I couldn't stand to have people looking at me. I couldn't stand to I was the opposite of Yvette. I just wanted to be it behind the curtain, right? I wanted to be the person pulling the strings and not the one out there doing the show. And I'm still a little bit like that. I've been learning over the years, it's taken me quite a while, that it's okay to step out a little bit sometimes. But I have to say that my true joy comes in the success of the women that I work with. It just really, truly, it's honest and it's pure. And I feel it's like, with my kids, like I would rather talk about my kids than myself. And I would rather talk about the women that have been through Emerge than myself. And it just gives me just such joy when I think about women like, Brooke Lehrman, who's come so far, and, all the women who serve in the General Assembly, and all of the women who even have the courage just to step up and run even for Central Committee, because I saw them on those first days and I could feel their pain. I could see it and I could feel it and I could empathize with it. And it helped me learn how to lead them out of that. There's 2 things that the women come into the class saying that they have the most fear of. And number one is fundraising. And number 2 is public speaking. And they are really hand in hand, because when you're asking someone for money, it's putting yourself out there, you're standing there naked, right? It's difficult. So watching them transform from the first day, and and then when they graduate, and seeing them grow through that, it helps this introverted person feel like I've stepped out with them without having to put myself out there, really. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And it's funny because I think you bring up 2 themes. One is being vulnerable, which people love because you're more relatable, but then also having perspective. And in many ways, putting yourself out there more and more, others have the chance, hopefully a supportive audience, to give you perspective. Because sometimes we can all be our most critical critic. So I do love that. And in fact, Joyce, in many ways, you're sort of in the thick of it now. Like you're hopefully many years to come in your political career. But, how do you find the ability to get that perspective when you need it, or to recharge when you need it? Or you don't? Hopefully you do, though.
Yeah, I think we need to, in order to be effective leaders and effective representatives in the field. And I love what Yvette said too. I just knowing when to pull back. I am somebody who is also extroverted. I will, work a room. I will give 110%. I'm an oversharer. I'm an open book. I'm from Jersey. I just keep it real. And people said, maybe not too real, sometimes you have to polish that back and learn how to censor and not wear your feelings on your face. So definitely, I feel like an infant on this journey and still learning how to mature emotionally, mentally, and intellectually on this political path. And I turn to my advisors. I turn to these women that I have met in Emerge, that I've met that I consider, mentors in my field of prosecution that are that I consider more politically savvy. I can also, like you use the word naive, I can absolutely be naive and take people at face value and not realize that there is lots of backroom conversations and underbellies that I haven't been privy to yet. I'm so grateful for women on this path that, lift as they rise, that have been willing to share these war stories and be honest about what comes ahead and the sacrifices that need to be made. So I'm still beginning this journey, but if not for the women that came before me, it just wouldn't be possible.
Well, I love that people are putting in their questions, and these are really good questions. So I'm just going to ask a couple more, and then we'll go into the Q&A. And folks, as you have questions, continue to send them over to Q&A. One of the things that we started the conversation with is, how can others who may not be on that path to seeking a political election or position still contribute? Yvette, I'd love to start with you, because I feel like anytime I've seen you speak, you have an entourage or a halo of influence, which I love. And I think, when you and I were talking previously, you were so emphatic about people do not have to be wonderful on stage like you are. They can still contribute to our political system and to leadership. Could you speak to that a little bit?
I would suggest you find your passion, because then you will devote the type of energy to whatever that quest is that will make you successful. So if your passion is in organizing, for example, if you want to be someone who sits in an office and makes phone calls, or if you want to go out and canvass, if you want to do postcards, anything that gets your candidate moving forward, then do that. If you have the connections and the resources to help raise funds, you can do that. You can be a fundraiser if that brings you joy. You can be a mentor for someone that you see has potential, and maybe you want to help shape that person and guide that person, or introduce that person to someone who might be influential in their lives and help them along the path that they're on. So there's so many ways that you can do this work without actually being the person that's doing the work, because in many ways you're a lot more effective and influential. Now, while I talk about my time on stage and what I did, what I really wanted to be was the director. I did. I wanted to put the production together, which is why I enjoyed being state party chair, because I could put the production together. That production was helping Democrats get elected and going all around the state and doing whatever was necessary, whether it was a rally, a speech, a phone bank, a canvas, whatever I had to do to get a Democrat in any jurisdiction elected. That's what I did. Because at that point, I was making this wonderful casserole that was going to be this fantastic feast for the state of Maryland. And we achieved that in the last election. That's exactly what we did. So there are so many ways to do what you need to do that don't necessarily require you to be that candidate out front if that is not what your interest is. But you got to be passionate about it, because if you're not passionate, then you won't stick with it.
I love that so much, because in many ways, that's how you find the compliments. If everyone wanted to be that front person, you wouldn't have everyone for a show, you know, doing the lights, doing the props, choreography, etc. I also love the casserole analogy because, you know, everything is layered. There's the farmer, there's the mills person, you know, everyone should find where they are most suited to contribute. So I think that speaks to that very well. One of the things I wanted to ask as well is, you know, one question that came through is, well, there is a lot of time that has to be dedicated when you do find that passion. And how do you see people stepping into it without just saying like, oh, I'm gonna just completely jump in? Like, how do people overcome oftentimes the time commitment and, you know, potential future pay differences? Like, what are some things that can help people to get comfortable, especially women, in making that transition into something that's more politically driven?
Is that for me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So this is gonna sort of come off a little flippant, but those people that can't make the adjustment don't last. I mean, they really don't. Those people that can't that don't figure it out. There isn't a prescription, because there's no one size fits all, right? Some people, I was fortunate in, and I joke about this all the time, but I was fortunate in everything that I did because, you know, I'm married to someone who had a real job. You know, and others that don't have that resource, that support system. And I'm not saying you have to have that in order to be successful, so don't misunderstand. I'm just saying that worked in my life. But those people that don't have that, they build a network. They build a network of whoever that happens to be that will support you in your passion, that will uplift you in your passion, and that will provide you the time, the space that you need to do what you need to do as they pick up the other things that you normally do, pick up the slack for you that you normally do. That could be a good girlfriend, that could be a male friend, that could be a sister, that could be a relative, that could be a parent, that could be anyone that is part of your village. So, but nobody, and I think all of us will admit on this call, nobody does it without a village. You have to have whatever that village looks like for you, then that makes it easier to do what you need to do. But if the commitment and the passion aren't there, you don't last. You really don't.
That makes a lot of sense. And Diane, you know, you've seen so many women come through Emerge. I mean, I'm sure you agree with what Yvette said, but what are other common characteristics that you often see that sort of help someone on their journey?
Yeah, Yvette really nailed it. It's passion, and it's what is the fire in your belly that really gets you motivated to do what it is that you want to do. And you know, one of the things of all the years that I worked on campaigns and I was a volunteer coordinator was, I think, the most educational one, because you realize very quickly that when 20 people raise their hand and say, yes, I'll show up for door knocking, and only 5 show up, that's the reality, right? That's the reality. And you have to learn to deal with that. Those other people who don't show up what I tended to do was I tended to try to tap into what it is that they really wanted to do. Where do you fit in? And how can you be part of what Yvette said of the village? Maybe not in a big way. Not everybody has to be a super volunteer. Not everybody has to be the #1 star of the board that they're sitting on, or, you know, the part of what it is that they're involved in. But find the piece that makes you happy, that gives you that fire in your belly. Otherwise, it's not going to last. And, you know, Yvette is right. People who aren't given the opportunities to do it, what they're passionate about, will fall by the wayside and they'll go somewhere else. So I think it's, you know, I think that we have to look at our own individual wiring, and we have to recognize that in others, and we have to help them figure out where it is that they're going to fit in, and they're going to shine their best with whatever the passion is that drives them to do their best. Does that
That
answer?
makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And in many ways, this sort of ties nicely to one of the questions that came in, which is, you know, obviously in any industry, in any field, there are moments, especially as women, where we face adversity. And sometimes this was a question from one person attending the webinar. How is it that strong women, especially those who are running for a public office, if they're targeted by others and are on the receiving end of that kind of negativity, what are tactics to handle it? I'd love to hear, Diane, you know, what are tactics that you've seen? I'm sure you've seen a lot of people who have been, you know, suppressed and had to be picked up again. And then afterwards, Joyce, I'd love to hear from your firsthand experience as well. But Diane?
I was out to lunch with somebody, some women not too long ago, and one of the women asked me, what do I do when I discover that a woman is a dud? And the question made me mad because I don't believe that there is such a thing as a dud. I think she just hasn't found her passion. And I don't want to beat that up, but it's part of mentoring means to listen, right? And the more you listen to someone, the more they're going to tell you and show you who they are and what they need. And as a mentor, which I've been doing for many, many years now, I have learned that sometimes somebody just needs somebody to be a sounding board. And if they're failing, or they're not doing well in what they have chosen to do, and they can talk it through, they come full circle in their own mind. They come full circle out loud. They hear themselves talking about it, and then they discover they need to switch gears, right? And then finding that spot that really helps to fulfill them is the challenge as a mentor, to be honest. So, you know, if somebody feels like they're failing, I think that we all go through that. And one of the things that I like to say is that, you know, failing just means that it's an opportunity to start again and to try again. And whether it's in the same vein or in taking a different tactic. We're in the middle, and this is not a commercial. I don't want to make it sound like it is. We're in the middle of fundraising right now. And I was in sales back in another life, and somebody said to me, salesmanship starts, or womanship starts, when the customer says no. And so when life tells you no, then you start rethinking. There's another tactic. Ask questions, you know, figure it out. And women are really good at, like Yvette said, women are really good at figuring it out. And I think that this is something that, you know, being in an all-woman space can help. And I've noticed that helped me. that helped me when I was first offered this job. And I thought, what the heck am I going to do with this? Like, I caught this fish and now I have no idea how to cook. So, you know, sort of being thrown in but being in an all-woman space made things made it easier, made it more comfortable, and I felt supported and uplifted. But I really think that because failure is so much of a part of our lives, and it is for everyone in some aspects, learning to learn from it and to say it's okay to drop that rope that you've been pulling on for so long that isn't working for you, and maybe look toward a different direction, another angle.
I really like that too, especially as a fellow, I'm in sales as well. And that's always what we do. We try to find, well, be curious, you know, or constantly understand, well, why are people saying no? Try and look from their perspective. And in many ways, that can also help to ameliorate your opponent or people who are being hostile towards you if you try to be empathetic towards them. Joyce, as you've, you know, gone on your political journey with past elections and campaigns, can you speak to moments where you've, you know, faced certain characters that have really been hard, that you, let's say, just didn't look forward to being in the same situation with, and how did you work through that? Because I know, you know, in the line of work that all three of you do, like, you're exposed to so many different characters, some chosen to be surrounded by you, some not.
Yeah, just, you know, I'm going to tie it to your previous question too, with regards to the time and sacrifice and commitment, especially as women. You know, I think as a, you know, I have a 3-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 15-year-old. So I'm in the thick and the beginning stages of parenting as well. And some of the biggest criticisms I have when people find out I'm wanting to run for a state's attorney is that, well, you're too young. Your children are too young. You're too, you know, who's watching your children? Who's going to watch your kids or your poor husband? And, you know, this unwelcomed commentary and attack on me as a mother and as a wife. And that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about my capabilities as a state's attorney, you know, and what I can do for the community. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges in the criticisms of comments, even people who are trying to be supportive, and giving that kind of unwelcomed, tearing down remarks. And even I think we discussed it in our Emerge class with my other colleagues who are in different stages of their life, but still face the same type of criticism. You know, no one says a man is too old to run, you know, but for some
Especially
reason,
not today.
right. Correct. But for some reason, when it's a female candidate, I mean, it's just, we're open to any and all criticisms about our appearances, about what we, you know, how we dress, how we are perceived, and, you know, whether you're being too friendly and that's going to be considered as flirtatious. I mean, there is just such a hard criticism of just womanhood, period, you know, especially in the political space. And in coming up in the position that I am, I mean, some of the attacks that I had on my character were that I somehow was compromising, or somehow got the position because I did favors for my elected a state's attorney, you know, and that I didn't earn this out of my intelligence and hard work and trial work. So just all different sorts of criticisms like that, and to your next question of how do you rise against that, you know, how do you develop the thick skin, is a lot of what Diane said, you know, is really, one, letting my work speak for themselves, you know, and I try to be authentic and as real as possible, as I said, and to take those and have those hard conversations, and to call out. And, you know, I hate to use a term because it's become trite, but that call out culture, you know, I think so many of us have been conditioned against those microaggressions, just not to respond and to just brush it off or try to move past it. But I've really tried to, hey, that's, unwarranted, or my children know that I love them and everything that I do is also for them, and try to, respond to those criticisms, when in the past I wouldn't have.
And I mean, I think everybody was nodding to everything you said. Yes. It's so unfortunate that those things still come up in that way. I myself hear them in the context of being a businesswoman, not, I know you all hear them in the context of being in politics, and it's really frustrating, but I think you're right. You have to just ground in yourself and have that confidence. I know we're almost at the hour, and there's one really good question I want to make sure that I ask. So one of our participants asked, how are we going to attract women to run for Maryland General Assembly, which is only a 90-day term where they not only have to campaign, but they need to remove themselves from their job, family, other commitments, which may hinder, work-life balance. Any thoughts initially from Diane? I'll let you take it.
Yeah, this is my wheelhouse. So, yeah, I mean, it's challenging. There's absolutely, and one of the things that we're sure to do is to be honest with these women before they make the decision to run. Is this going to work for them? Is it going to work for their employer to take the time off? And is it going to work for their family as they spend all this time in Annapolis? And so, there has to be an honest conversation that they have with themselves and with their family and with their employer and anybody else whose lives, including their friends, because, if you have any kind of a, life outside of home or work with friends, they're going to feel neglected as well. So the time commitment for the General Assembly, especially, but for any elected office, is not just the time spent at the dais. There is many other things that need to be done. And we have a lot of really, really great examples of women who have pulled this off, and I like, I'm going to bring up Brooke Learman because she was the first, right? So she got elected to office the day she showed up to interview to be in our first class. She was in labor and didn't tell us. And she ended up going home and then going to the hospital and giving birth to her first child that very night. Now, I don't recommend that.
Yeah.
But some women just know how to pull these things, off. And she's raised, she's had 2 children since she's been in. And since then, there have been many children that have been born by women who have been serving not only in the General Assembly, but in other offices across the state. And I think it is part of, being what what they see. The General Assembly can be a tough one, but we've managed to gain enough seats that we are at 42.6%, and I know that because I looked it up today, of women represented in the General Assembly. It's a little harder for Maryland than it is for other states to reach 50% because we have more representatives in the General Assembly. Nevada is one of my rival states is in the Emerged Network, and they have 51%, but then they only have like 60 seats total. So it's not as big a mountain to climb. So, women are doing it, and it's not for everyone. And I think that, given the situation with the General Assembly, the tough 90-day session, and then constituent work that has to be done when you're not in session, it's not just the 90 days, but it is a lot more than that. And it's done outside of a lot of working hours as well. This is not a 9-to-5 job, and it's not something that you can, just put aside at 5 p.m. and then make dinner for the kids. You have to be places, you have to be doing things. And it's that village that Yvette talked about that makes it so important, building a network. And, we talk a lot about network building, not only in the 1-day seminar that we do in the summer for women who are thinking about running for office, but in the Emerge Maryland classes, we talk a lot about networking as well, building out your network and getting that support and making sure that it's not just you that's doing the heavy lifting, but that you have other hands at the wheel as well.
I love that, Diane, because it really sort of goes full circle to finding your passion, finding your limitations. Really sounds like, what are your guardrails? What are you willing to do? What are you not willing to do? And I sort of want to take that as, pose the last question to end our wonderful 1 hour conversation. And I thank you so much, all three of you, for joining us today. But if there was one thing, if you could go in the way back time machine, if there was one thing you could say to yourself early in your career that each of you has already done some amazing things in your career, but was there one thing you wish you knew at the start that may have taken a little longer to find out? Diane, I'll start with you.
Oh gosh, there's so many things that I learned along the way. But I'd say that the main thing is just to have faith that, if the first people that you encounter on your journey aren't necessarily the ones that are helping you, there's others that are going to come along. So, Joyce talked about having people question whether or not she should be home with her children. These aren't just men that are saying this. Yeah. There are women that are saying this as well. So, find your tribe.
Thank you, Diane. Yvette?
I think I probably would have said to myself, trust yourself more, believe in yourself more. You know more than you think you do. And if you don't, you'll find out, you'll learn it, but just trust yourself and not be afraid to take a risk. Sometimes, we tend to play it safe. And then when an opportunity presents itself to us, and I still do it now. I just did it last week and my husband said, don't do that. Do I know enough? Can I do this? Well, why did, and then I have to stop and say, obviously you do, because this opportunity would not have been presented to you if you didn't know enough and if you couldn't do it. And if you can't do it, you won't get it. It's as simple as that, because the universe works that way in our lives. And I truly do believe that. Someone said, I think Diane said, we all fail and eventually we find out why. Because something else happens in our lives that makes us say, you know what? That was not a good thing. And I see why that didn't happen. The universe answers the questions for us as we travel along this journey. So I think that we need to just trust and believe. And if it's the wrong decision, you can make another one. That's it.
I love that so much, Yvette, because one of the things I feel like I've learned over the years is men don't often ever think through, why am I getting this opportunity? They just take it. and I think that's real wisdom there, because it's true. I mean, we all need to pressure test ourselves in all parts of our life. Thank you for that. Joyce?
I would echo those sentiments as well as say that to my younger self that there's plenty of time. I think that there's always this fear that I had to rush, that there wasn't enough or that there wasn't enough time. And I think I lost out on enjoying a lot of experiences and just being where I was rather than constantly looking for what's next. So I would have just definitely paused and enjoyed the roses, as they say. And I did want to address just some of the comments on the chats, because I do want to speak to that. I absolutely feel like as a woman of color myself, that there is a different aspect to that. And I have faced absolutely racism in Frederick County, if you could imagine that, as the first person of color in any type of leadership role in the state's attorney's office, as it is already. And I spoke on a panel yesterday and talked about this. I mean, bringing things like implicit bias training to my office and things like a DEI training and opening up people's perspectives and really getting attacked and getting hostility because of it. And so there is different barriers and additional barriers, especially depending on what jurisdiction you're representing or hoping to run in. And again, I turn to my mentors on this path already, who have been breaking down those barriers little by little. But I definitely, agree with the comment in there and wanted to address that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it is a reality. And I thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it makes people realize all of us aren't invincible. There's not some magical happy path that some people stumble upon that does not have adversity or those pressures. And, I really just want to close us out by sharing that we are a network here at WDC, and we are always looking for folks to join as part of our membership drive. I hope, can folks see my screen for our membership drive URL? Wonderful. So thank you again. If you enjoyed today's panel, it was such a treat, and it was truly an honor for me to get to know each and every one of you on our panel. I feel like, you all shared even more nuggets of wisdom in our prep call, so I feel very lucky for that. But if those of you who are not members of WDC today are looking to join, please just go to womensdemocraticclub.org. And thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it. Have a safe and wonderful evening, everybody. Bye all.
Thanks for inviting me. That was great.
Thank you so much, Yvette. You're amazing.